This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
They call me crazy cause I'm facing all my giants. They try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying. But that's just me, I'm gonna live out in defiance.
Welcome, Alphas. Thanks for joining us. We have a great show for you today. Our guest is Chase Sterling, founder of Wellbeing ThinkTank. She's an Army veteran who has built a career on improving both individual and organizational well-being. We'll talk to her in a bit about her dedication to the mission of improving workplaces. But first, for all you Swifties out there, which I know Joe is, Joe's got some Navy news.
Very swift. I've always been known. They called me Swift Joe. I don't know if you know that. You didn't pick up on that?
Swift Joe.
Old Swifty. That's what they called me. Lost my swift leg in the war. So the Pentagon clearly has a crush on a pop star. So back in June, Naval Sea Systems Command, NAVSEA, Executive Director Chris Miller urged employees to fill out a survey in an email peppered with Taylor Swift lyrics. Some examples. Out of 87,000 NAVSEA teammates, I've got a blank space and I wrote your name. Your participation in the survey will change the game. This survey will take you less time than listening to, that was a little on the nose, All Too Well. Taylor's version, 10-minute edition. Thanks to my daughter, I know. That sounds like something that he had to go through and is therefore punishing others with it.
I wonder if he had to pay the Taylor Swift copyright every time he sourced a lyric, or if it's like, I don't know. Anyway,
I think if he gets paid for it, so you should just walk up and hand him a $5 bill. And now we're in a complicated legal situation.
Are we having to pay for them now that it's kind of like third hand because we are technically quoting somebody else's quote who's quoting her?
Michael Scott, just like him with Wayne Gretzky.
What?
You know, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And then under it, he wrote on The Office, he wrote Wayne Gretzky and then dashed again Michael Scott. But there's more. It says, your feedback will never go out of style. My wildest dreams are based on you completing the survey. So the annual FEVS survey assesses workplace conditions and culture throughout the federal government, and Miller's tactic may have paid off. NAVSEA's participation in the survey grew from 12% to 27%.
Ooh, that is hockey stick growth curve.
Double. That is huge. That, you know what? I can't be mad at it. You know, it takes modern solutions to solve modern problems. But this apparently isn't the Pentagon's first clever use of T-Swizzle's lyrics.
That's what you normally call her. Why is that so funny, Joe?
I don't know. Like, I read over this and it didn't, T-Swizzle didn't jump out at me until just now. So T-Swizz, earlier this year, Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh pushed back against a conspiracy theory alleging that DoD considered turning Taylor into a PSYOPs asset. Her lyrics-laden denial included, as for this conspiracy theory, we are going to shake it off.
Shake it off.
The only way to handle that from a PR standpoint would be to respond in T-Swizzle lyrics.
It's perfect because you don't even have to hire a legal team. If you make Swifties mad, they just come for you. So you know what I'm saying? The only way to really defend yourself in the situation is to fully embrace T-Swizzle, because at this point you've got an army behind you.
My gosh, can we stop saying T-Swizzle?
I can't stop. I'm doing everything I can. I'm giving her all she's got, Captain.
No, I don't feel like there's even a try here happening.
Well, I think, you know, aside from the funniness of it all and the Swifties and the army and the sea of, you know, young girls feverishly following her and the hordes, this is great improvements on the return for the survey. So, you know, the ability to make something pretty like mundane and routine, like engaging and fun.
Yeah.
And
it obviously worked.
Yeah.
I wonder how surveys work for the Marines because they can't read. So there's got to be like a coloring book or something, right?
That's what the Navy. Okay, so we went through an entire class. It took about 2 hours, and so they got all the Navy corpsmen together and talked about non-patronizing way to read to Marines. And so one of the big things that they talked about was just really tone of voice, of just being like, "Oh, did you know that if you wash your hands after you use the restroom, you won't get sick? That's so weird. Who knew?"
Wow.
Yeah.
Impressive. So
Yeah.
I bet pop-up books really had an impression too.
Pop-up book sandcastles weirdly worked because we did a lot of running, and so we would run around, and then I would stop, make a sandcastle, use it as a teaching aid. They would run another 3 miles, come back around, and I could hear them grunting as they came around the corner of the building. I was like, I got to finish this up. That's generally how it happened. So,
Whereas, separately in aviation, if it wasn't documented in a manual with all the processes and steps, then it's like, how could you know what to follow along? It's not documented and written in clear black and white. Then
You guys like your
doesn't
text?
mean it'll be followed, but it does need to be
Yeah.
written down.
Builders.
that's right.
Heck. Chubb.
So are
Check.
either of you guys Swifties?
I mean, I adore her. I think
Yeah.
she's got a lot going for her.
Mhm.
I think young women need a strong woman to look up to. I think we need more women that are good influences. So more power to her. And I think if it takes a Taylor Swift to make people fill out a survey, more power to them.
Well, I can relate to the dad portion of this because I have a 13-year-old and a 7-year-old, and my 13-year-old is kind of more in her, eclectic, I'm a creative, music era, but my 7-year-old is unabashedly a Swiftie, and she's, Dad, put on Love Story. And this, I mean, honestly, really ramped up for her within like the last few months. She won that pageant, and the whole theme for the big upcoming National Peanut pageant is that they're in their peanut era, and so everything is themed like Taylor Swift throughout. So it's a huge thing, and it's a real thing. And so I feel for this dad here, knowing all these lyrics and song titles.
I go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I can't wait until your peanut turns into a nutcracker.
Oh my goodness. See, I'm glad that I let you go because that was a well-timed joke, and I would have just ruined it by trying to be remotely serious. I'm not good at being serious anyway.
Hey, we're still waiting on the cameo from Miss America at National Peanut, so we'll see.
That would be cool. As far as music goes, I always try to be open-minded. If you tell me that Justin Bieber's got the best Christmas album ever, I'm gonna listen to it. I'm gonna give it a try, and I'm gonna go into it with an open mind.
Weird Al has by far the best Christmas album.
Really? I'll have to really go through that one.
I'm sorry, no, Mariah Carey.
Oh no.
Oh yes.
They start thawing her, was it, or around November?
Yeah, Thanksgiving.
They're
That's when the
putting
turkey
stuff out at
thaws, so does
Walmart
Mariah
already,
Carey.
guys. It's July, so.
Well, I grew up with so much different types of music, and everything from Brown Eyed Girl to Led Zeppelin and Scorpion and Yes. And so I did that same thing to my kids. And I haven't really got to the point where I listened to Taylor Swift on my own, but I did get my daughter into both Tool and Fiona Apple, which are my top two. So success.
I heard your kids do think you are a tool. So
Stacy Pearsall is in rare form today. Ladies and gentlemen.
Boy, okay, alphas. We got a survey waiting for you. Are you a Swiftie? Stick around. We'll find out if our guest, Chase Sterling, is a Swiftie right after the break.
Talking about suicide is hard, but the American Legion has joined forces with Columbia University to develop training for those who want to learn more about interacting and responding to veterans who may be in crisis. American Legion Be the One training. In the 90-minute class, you'll learn to understand the types of suicidal ideation and 4 behaviors that indicate imminent risk, how to use the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale to determine at-risk individuals, how to identify risk factors and warning signs, and how to communicate effectively with individuals who may be at risk of hurting themselves. Online and in-person sessions are available. Visit betheone.org/training to find a session. Learn the skills that'll give you the confidence to talk about suicide and be the one to save just one veteran.
Hello, hello. Hey, Adam. Glad you're back from fighting for veterans issues in DC.
It's
Yeah.
good to be back. It's hot up there, man. It's hot in DC this time of year.
It's hot everywhere. Well, everywhere I'm at. Today, we are joined by Army veteran Chase Sterling, who founded the Wellbeing ThinkTank. Chase founded Wellbeing ThinkTank, which is what provides educational events on individual and organizational well-being. And so, Chase Sterling, welcome to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on as a guest today.
Hey,
Awesome.
Chase. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you today. So I actually haven't shared this on the show yet because it hasn't really been relevant until now. But I got out of the Army in 2015, started a nonprofit, and then about a year later, I joined Accenture in their junior military officer program. And so for those that don't know, our listeners, that's a large global management consulting firm. And I actually landed in their talent and organization space. So I got to deep dive into the world of employee experience, workplace wellness, the future of work, all sorts of organizational psychology. So just really looking forward to hearing a little bit about your story and updates on that front, because I guess I left Accenture in 2021 to go back to more veteran mental health work full time. So today, though, you're the CEO of Wellbeing ThinkTank, as well as a well-being consultant. But when you got out of the military, you didn't jump right into that position. Surprise, surprise. And as many of us want to believe that we're ready to jump into the CEO role after getting out of the military, we really have to cultivate an expertise in something to go along with that leadership training. So I thought maybe a good place to start would just be if you could share a little bit about your journey, from Army to well-being CEO. And looking back, what are kind of those key moments that stick out that kind of shaped you to where you are in your journey now?
Sure. That's a lot. That's like a lot of things to say. So feel free to interrupt me or redirect me if I ramble too much. I joined the military a little bit later. I was 21 when I went into the Army. I love telling people that I barely graduated high school. They actually gave me a D- to make sure I could graduate. So I graduated high school with a 1.4 GPA. And I was in a very bad home life situation. I had lived in a group home for a while. So I was just out there working, and I got recruited in the mall. I did not know anything about the military at all when an Army recruiter came up to me at the mall, and I ended up joining the military. And that is where I fell in love actually with fitness and health. The very first time I went to NTC, obviously in the morning, everyone's in PT gear. And so you don't know what rank anyone is. So everyone's kind of equal, except some people had patches on. And I was like, I want to know what this patch is. And it was the physical fitness patch. And so I was like, well, I want to get one of those because then I look like fancier in the morning. So I went up to my sergeant at the time. I was like, hey, I want to train and get that. I got really into weightlifting, working out. And this has been a very long time ago now, like over 20 years, but I was in the like muscle and fitness military issue in 2002. It was a very long time ago. But being in the Army, really, I fell in love with health and wellness and working out. As I left active duty, I transitioned into the reserves, and I was active drilling the whole time. I started college. I got my degree in exercise science and health psychology. And eventually I finished my time. So I finished my commitment and I was fully out of the military. But then I had a really traumatic injury when I was 30. I actually had a botched foot surgery, which turned into multiple foot surgeries.
Oh.
Ended up having a host of other kind of medical issues. So I couldn't be as physically active as I was before. But luckily, my brain still worked. It worked really well. And I was able to transition into workplace well-being. And my first foray into that was actually at a really large organization. I think I can probably say where I worked at. I mean, it's on
Yeah.
my profile. I worked at Google, and it was when it was still kind of small. There were only 7,000 employees, I think, when I
Oh,
started,
wow.
35,000 when I left. So I was there during this like really kind of unique culture shift time. So
Mhm.
um I was there when the founders, Larry and Sergey, like moved into offices. So they used to sit on the floor with all the employees, and then all of a sudden they became a little bit more removed. I was
Mhm.
when the Google X building was opened, and that was the first building not everyone had access to. And that made people feel, some kind of way, like maybe they didn't belong, or why can't I go into this building?
Hmm.
So I really started noticing all these other things that impacted people's health and well-being. Um, and that was kind of my first step into workplace well-being. I ended up going back to school and getting my master's in IO psychology. And my focus is on occupational health, which really studies how does work impact our health and well-being. Um, and since I transitioned, I kind of say I've been on every side of the industry. So I kind of know the good, bad, and ugly. I've worked in the insurance system, and a lot of veterans, if you haven't been in the civilian, like for-profit healthcare system, it's a lot. So I worked on the insurance side, on the broker side. So wellness is actually legislated in the Affordable Care Act and on what that means.
Mm.
And then technology side. So how do you use technology to kind of influence and create sustainable behavior change? And then consulting. But I really appreciate what you said about, yeah, I did not go out on my own right away. It was a long time. I was 43 when I became an entrepreneur. And I have younger entrepreneurs reach out to me a lot and say, how are you successful? How are you doing okay? And I was like, it's a lot easier when you wait to go out on your own and you already have kind of a reputation and a network and you've kind of done all that work. I think when you're junior in your career, you can still have amazing ideas. And I really value insights from all different people and generations. But you just have you're more established when you're older. I mean, that's just being on this earth longer. So I became an entrepreneur in 2019 and I started consulting on my own. And when I started consulting, I said, I consult, I do strategies, I speak at a lot of conferences on different topics, and then I educate. So Wellbeing ThinkTank was kind of my education arm. And with the pandemic in 2020, everything kind of shifted. The world really changed. So we
Oh
pivoted
yeah.
to virtual events. We had people joining us all over, and we've just kind of continued to progress from there. And it's a really fascinating industry to be in, because if I ask people, do you care about your health and well-being? Every single hand goes up. And I say, do you want to work at a non-toxic workplace? Every single hand goes up. So that means there's a lot of ideas and opinions, but when you have ideas and opinions that haven't yet been tested, they're just that. It doesn't mean they're bad ideas. One of our core values is evidence-based but experimental. So we want to be rooted in theory, but life is not a lab. There's still a lot of research that can be done. So how can we take what we know to be true and still experiment with it? But it can be really dangerous to just be like, well, my opinion is this, therefore everyone should do this. And what works for you might not work for other people. So there's kind of a difference between storytelling and sharing your own experience and being really inspirational or giving people motivation. But then when you start to give advice, you got to make sure that that advice or things that you're directing people towards are rooted in science, or rooted in things that are proven. And then of course you can massage it, you can play with it, but yeah, that was a lot, but
Well,
that's
you
it
did
about
You
me.
so
navigated
good.
it well.
And I know Stacy's got a question for you, but just let me reflect just briefly, just what an incredible journey and experience you have. And I love it, the origins and service into fitness. And then, just highlighting what you talked about is like, yeah, oftentimes when you get out of the service, and I know I felt this way, having been a company commander in Iraq, 8 Apache helicopters, $250 million on my property book. I was like, I could take on the world, but I had to like learn some real skills, to be able to apply that. So just having like a patience, even in a world where we're like so impatient, to be able to move forward and to grow in that. And then, yeah, I can also say, like, I was a change management consultant for a global consulting firm during the pandemic. We were actually rolling out Microsoft Teams to Toyota. I think I can say that. And it went from like just a collaboration in a chat tool to the most important thing, because the whole world went to work from home, that was impacting their way to do business. And it was like the world before COVID, especially in the organizational psychology, change management side of the realm, was yeah, we know that stuff's kind of important, but we just need this technology in here. It doesn't, like, we just need it to work. Like, the people are just going to use it into like COVID world, post-COVID world, the whole world changing and working remotely. It's like, this is one of the most important things, and should be considered in every single project, because not taking into account the wellness of the employee and their well-being to be able to show up and do this work, it's going to have dire consequences for you and for the organization and your ability to make profit. So it's an incredible journey you've been on. And I know Stacy's got a question for you to dive into maybe the details a little bit more.
Well, I actually want to jump in because you mentioned something. First of all, I want to thank you so much for being here. I grew up in a beauty shop, so I think that I can speak from authority when I say you have great hair. But as somebody who's personally happiest when things are direct and simple, I think that complexity should be saved for humor. And love and dealing with things like that. But relationships and work and things like that, I feel like people should be in an environment where they can say what they mean and mean what they say. It's rarely the problem itself that is an issue. So as somebody who has a prosthetic above knee amputation, I don't look at stairs as a big problem in my life because I have a plan for that. It's usually the complicated solutions that happen when things go wrong that are the stressors. It's when, I can change a tire, but when the tire is stuck or I can't get the spare out from under the car, and all of a sudden things have gotten a lot more complicated, that are the problem. And so I say that because we've all lived in environments or worked in environments where we had good people there and a bad job. And then we've had good jobs with bad people. Just ask anybody who's ever been in the military. You get a big mix of that. So what advice, though, would you give to someone who is struggling to find the satisfaction in that current job, but values their workplace relationships? And I don't mean that as to how to maintain those relationships when you leave. I mean, how do you begin working as just a regular person in an environment that isn't working? How do you work to improve that?
Yeah, Joe, one thing you said just early on, you talked about communication, and I have a lot of chaseisms, and one of them is almost all problems in the workplace come from missed communication or miscommunication. And I'm of the mindset that most humans are good. I think most people are well-intentioned. Most people aren't trying to be manipulative or evil. There are bad people out there, no matter where you're at. And so you've got to kind of figure that out. But a lot of times people are just people. I mean, it's just human nature. And yeah, kind of what you said was another thing I say. Sometimes in the workplace, you can have a coworker who's, maybe you don't really like them personally, but they're really good at their job. And so it's easy to kind of give them a pass because you're like, man, they are awesome, so I'm just going to kind of ignore them. Or you really like them personally, but they're not so great at their job, and you can kind of also give them a pass on that. But
That's so hard.
Bad personality and they suck at their job, that's like the worst. But it's interesting when you talk about kind of protecting yourself in the workplace. I always hate it when people are like, leave, quit. We can't. People need to make money. We have to pay our bills.
Yeah.
So many Americans live paycheck to paycheck. You can't just up and quit your job. And if you are a veteran and you don't have a rating and have access to the VA healthcare system, most Americans access their healthcare through their employer. So that you can't just up and quit your job because you need those benefits for you, maybe for your family. I think if you're in a toxic work environment, the best thing you could do is figure out how do you care for yourself and prioritize your own mental health and physical health and really put up strong boundaries. And then enforcing those boundaries is very difficult, especially if your workplace is continually violating them. And that's
Mm,
the things that causes burnout. So like, for example, if you have an office job and
I
you
want to do the snap thing that
yeah,
people do and they like
if
really
you
agree
like
with.
block off the lunch hour because that's your lunch, and then someone books a meeting over it, I'm sorry, I don't want to meet with you at noon unless you're feeding me. Um, so if you block that, which is a great mechanism, and something I recommend workers do who are in office environments, but if it's constantly being violated, it's just hard. But again, a lot of times when we talk about workplace wellness, we talk about office jobs, and people need to remember that if we are lucky enough to work in kind of a white collar professional setting or an office job or a job that you can even work from home, you're in the minority. Most jobs you cannot work remotely, you cannot work from home, you're out there, boots on ground, doing retail work, hospitality, healthcare, construction. So most industries are not that. So I think you have to have a job. So if you're in a toxic work situation, you're going to have to plan. So do as much as you can. You can't just up and quit your job. Hopefully you can find a way out down the road. But continue to, focus on your well-being, put up those boundaries. If it's just kind of some little conflicts here and there, figure out who you can work with in the workplace. Who are your allies? We really need friendships in the workplace. There's a lot of research that shows that we need more friendships and social connections, and you need at least one person,
Yeah.
at least that one safe space. So try to find the good. I'm really into reframing and focusing on the positive and trying to, what can you control, what is within your control, and
Mm,
what can't you control. And if you can put your mindset into, okay, I work retail and I have no control over my schedule and I have this overbearing manager, but what can I control? I can control my interactions with guests. I can come in with a positive attitude. I can try to do these things for myself. I can take time on my break or after work to decompress. So focusing on what's within your control, I think is helpful.
I appreciate that. I think that it's so important that we focus on ourselves in general. And it's not selfish. It's getting yourself prepared for the world. So I appreciate that. That's wonderful.
And it's extremely challenging. And I think it's very challenging, especially for the veteran population, because a lot of us are the type of individuals that just naturally put other people before ourselves.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, as someone who knows this, like from my profession and like what I studied in school and everything, I still really struggle with it. I'm kind of a medical nightmare. I had this really rare condition. I had this major 10-hour surgery in 2020, and I went back to work too soon. I ended up having a heart attack and a stroke.
You're not
And
supposed to do that.
yeah, I know what to do. So even when you have all the
Yeah.
knowledge and education, it's still really hard. And even now, I'm still a work in progress. So it's not like you just change. Even sometimes when you have a major medical event, it just doesn't happen overnight. So it's a process to kind of work on yourself, put yourself first, and just know when you do take care of yourself, you're going to be a better partner. You're going to be a better parent. You're going to be a better, maybe pet parent, whatever your life is. My consulting firm is called HHP Cultures, which is happy, healthy, productive, which is a theory in psychology, but it's so true. Employees who are happy and healthy are going to do more work. And I don't use the word productive when I'm talking to workers. I use it when I'm talking to like the C-suite. But what we all want from work, people don't hate work. Our brains actually really love it. What we love are feelings of accomplishment. So how do we focus on feeling good at the end of every workday and feeling accomplished? Like if you left work each day and you felt accomplished and uplifted and good, how would that carry over into the rest of your life? So as individuals, we do have a personal responsibility to care for our own health and well-being, but the role of a workplace is to, at a bare minimum, not make us worse, leave us in homeostasis, but most of the time work brings us down. But imagine a world where work could uplift us. And I think it's possible. And it is, I do see it in some organizations, but it's not as widespread as it should be.
I think that you are going to really enjoy Stacy. I feel like you guys' stories are very similar in some ways, and if you're not careful, you are going to find yourself on after action.
No, I mean, I spent so much time with you, Chase. I feel like I already know you. First of all, thank you for your service. And in researching, I connected with you on so many levels. And what I landed on this podcast that you did, and you were talking about body type and
Oh yeah.
weight taping and weight shaming and I was gonna ask that in my first line of questioning, but since our line of topics are going down this well-being and work, I think I'm gonna swap my questions out, because you talked about what if work could lift you up. And it got my line of and I'm stumbling because my brain can't keep up, and this is where my problem lies. I have traumatic brain injury, and I have post-traumatic stress and sometimes anxiety because of all of those things. Like, am I going to stumble when pressure matters? And sometimes it has tripped me up. I've had, seizures when at the most inconvenient times, and I have done my level best to really hide it. A lot of people don't even know I have these life-altering things. So when I walk into a room of like power players, and I have been in rooms with like Fortune 500 company owner, people and presidents of the United States and things like that. It's hard not to let these things overcome me in many ways. What types of things? So like on a day-to-day, for somebody who may be struggling at the most basic levels, how does one overcome that? How do they take agency of their own workspace? How do they take power back in their lives from these things that seem overpowering? How can they assert their what if the only power I have, let's say, is my power of saying, I don't think I want to be coddled. I don't want somebody to look at me with sympathy or with, that look like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to live with, I'm sorry, for the rest of my life. That's why I choose not to tell people about this all the time, which I'm doing on a podcast that's listened to thousands, but I'm in my tribe. Okay. That said, how can somebody walk into a company like Google, where the majority aren't military veterans who aren't their tribe, and let them know, like, hey, today is probably not going to be a good day, or I may have off days, and ask for a little bit of grace? How can they do that thoughtfully? How can they do that without getting the I'm sorry kind of face?
Well, one, I want to say IO psychology is not therapy. Just so you guys know, I'm not a therapist. So
Yeah.
anything I talk about is nothing from like behavioral health, because that's not what I'm trained in. Oh gosh, but you're making me think of like so many different things, Stacy. Like, one, I have a really kind of complex background. I have complex post-traumatic stress. I have a lot of physical issues. I have a lot of invisible disabilities that people can't see. And when we think about diversity, the lowest common denominator is socioeconomic status. And so I'm someone who didn't grow up in the best place, and, worked at a lot of nonprofits, and, wasn't making tons of money, just sort of kind of like your regular average American. Oh gosh, I'm thinking about so many things from what you said, because it was so powerful. But when you mentioned, like, I did work at Google years ago. I was a contractor the whole time I worked there. And so being a contractor, you're almost like othered. It's almost like, oh, you're not good enough. It's kind of even almost like dare I say it, like a caste system, because our badges are different colors. So people would call me a red badger. They're like, oh, you're a red badger. I remember being in a meeting one time and someone literally put their hands on the table, looked underneath the table to look at my badge and
Ew.
was like, oh my God, you're a red badger, but you're so smart.
Oh, wow.
Yes. You know, and the reason why I say all that is, not everyone has the same opportunities. And, no matter who you're in the room with, whether it's a president, heads of state, all these things, we're all human, we really are at the same level. I really don't believe in this hierarchy of humans or that some people are better. I do think some people behave in ways that are better and kinder and more inclusive, and other people are maybe not nice people. But everyone has something to offer and provide in the workplace. We're not all built the same. We all have different skills and ability levels, but we're all human. And I think we need to have a lot of respect for one another. And respect is something that's missing in a lot of workplaces. This is one reason why maybe I did really well in the military, but I also learned very easily. I was not impressed. Rank never meant anything to me. And I learned very quickly, Adam, it sounds like obviously you were an officer, I was enlisted, but I learned very quickly, as long as I said, with all due respect, I could say just about whatever I wanted afterward. And I had no problems talking back to higher ranking officials. And I have done that and advocated for myself throughout my career. So if you have a point, if you have something to say, just know they're human beings. They might have a bigger title. They might be an executive. They might be a senior director. They could be a VP. That's a title. That doesn't mean anything. So everyone should be able to hold their own in the same space, but also have humility and humbleness, because no one knows everything. Like, I am an expert in like building strategies and I'm really good at it and I've done it and I have a lot of case studies and I can show this, but I don't know everything. I love collaboration. When you have an idea and I have an idea and, Joe has an idea and Adam has an idea, that's when magic happens, is when we get different viewpoints together and say, oh, wow, I never thought of it the way Stacy's looking at it. How could we massage this so it really turns into something great? I don't even know if I'm answering the question, because you made me start thinking about so many different things, but showing up at work each day, you really have to work on your own self-esteem and self-worth if that's something you're struggling with. And that's something I struggle with, some days of like, I am worthy. I am deserving of being in this space. I did this work, I deserve to be here. And yeah, some people have different skill sets, and how do we all just work together and recognize each other's unique talents and skills and humanity? Like, there's been a big shift in the past few years of talking about, rehumanizing the workplace and, making workplaces human again. And there's at Google, their top thing is focus on the user and all else will follow. And I'm like, well, in the workplace, just focus on the human. If we focus on what humans need, the world can be so much. Yeah, that's why I'm so proud.
I think in so many ways, maybe it's in a sense too, from a military standpoint, for so long, like I came in 1998. I think you came in around that time in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So around that time, there was still this mantra that the military was uneducated, right? Or that we had, as you said, you barely passed high school. Right. So, I came right out of high school, right into the military. And, so a lot of what I was getting from the outside was, oh, you're a red badger. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Like, so there's this imposter syndrome, like, oh, I don't necessarily belong here. I feel when I got out of the service and I transitioned into being a civilian journalist, a lot of people were like, I felt less than as well as a military journalist going into civilian journalism. So people called me a propagandist and not really, yeah. It's really, really interesting. So owning that space as well. And as you said, yeah, kind of saying, okay, yeah, I deserve to be here. I deserve a place at the table. That's really interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And the reason why I love always talking about my high school education, I did graduate my undergrad with a 3.96 and a 4.0 with my master's. Was very proud.
Good for you.
That's still though, school isn't really an indicator of intelligence. There are a lot of people who have dyslexia or learning disabilities or struggle, like
Yeah.
honestly suck at math. So I have other people that help me when I'm doing like data analysis. Like I can do the analysis and tell you what it all means, but I use other people to help me with formulas and stuff. But we all have different strengths and weaknesses, and everyone plays a role. So even with something like intelligence, you're born with the brain you have. And not everyone's brains have the same capacity and can do all the same things. That when you have something like a traumatic brain injury that alters your brain, you can't control that. That's not within your control. But then it's like learning how to work with it. So it's learning how to figure out, okay, what injury do I have? And then how do I work with it, knowing I have this? So that way it's not a limitation. It's just something that maybe makes me more unique, and approaches things in a different way. I think when it comes to something like an injury, I always tell people what I got out of a lot of my foot surgeries, which was kind of the first like medical issue I had a botched foot surgery, which turned into 5 foot surgeries, and shifted my career, was I was much more type A and kind of a hard ass. And then developing chronic pain and needing help, I developed a lot more empathy. And that's what we as humans need. It's so hard for people to think about, what is this like if it hasn't happened to me? Like Joe, you mentioned you're an amputee. Well,
Yeah.
I'm not an amputee, but just put yourself, what would it be like to navigate life with that? And then you can just develop a little bit more. But a lot of people really struggle to put themselves in other people's shoes. And if we could just do that a little bit more, have a little bit more kindness, a little bit more humanity, really, the world could be so much better. And yeah, again, that's why I'm so passionate about what I do, because the majority of us have to work a job to survive and to, get by. And work in the United States has just become this really negative thing, and it doesn't need to be negative. There's a wonderful book that came out, I believe in 2018, by Jeffrey Pfeiffer. He's a professor at Stanford, and it's called Dying for a Paycheck. And that really informed a lot of my work. It's over like 200,000 excess deaths a year just because of stress from work. So not even thinking about things like workplace accidents, and things that happen. But yeah, we see so many people attempting and completing suicide, due to work. And that's really tragic. And veterans, when we go into the workforce, we might be bringing, the things they carry. We're already carrying a lot of these things into the workplace. And for veterans, if you can find another veteran in the workplace, it is really helpful. And if you can't find someone at your workplace, make sure you have, your battle buddy or whatever outside, because it is different. Every now and then, if I talk about something that happened, like I remember someone said something and I was like, oh yeah, he got blown up. And they were just like, freaked out. And I was like, oh, that's like a normal thing in the military. Like, or one of my soldiers was taken hostage and executed. And, I go back for a memorial dinner, every now and then. And I'll say that to people. And yeah, none of you like flinch at all. But when I say that around a bunch of civilians in the work environment, I'm like, oh, well, I'm going back for this memorial dinner for my soldier. And they're like, whoa, and they all freak out. And I'm like, don't do that. But they just don't.
It's that look, that look that you. But that's what kind of what I was getting at is, you don't, when you're in that work environment, you don't want to feel sequestered, different, outside, other, marginalized, different.
Well, it's such a great discussion, and especially from the perspective of the individual's experience, and what are the tools and the resources, what is the organizations, or what do organizations today have as obligation for that individual that's experiencing on this spectrum. But you also highlighted some of the things that leaders can or can't do, or they don't do, that contribute to this. So maybe that's where I'd like to hone in a little bit more, is on the leadership side of things. And I was an officer and also company commander, so I did have leadership roles from that perspective. Had my raider being the battalion commander and brigade commander. But I was very fortunate that I had incredible world-class leadership. But in the captain's career course, some of my peers had absolute toxic leaders. So they had a completely different experience. So I know that exists. That wasn't really the case for me. The case for me was, I saw toxic leadership at Accenture. I saw toxic leadership in corporate America. I saw an absolute lack of leadership from leadership that I saw in the military in corporate America. So, I could see it in different, places. And then obviously being a consultant, going into different clients, I can relate to the different badge. We never got the employee badge, and we're looked like the outsider, caste system. And it's real. And, here I am, a military Apache helicopter pilot that got into this world-class consulting firm and into their talent organization practice. And because of my leadership experience, they hired me in as a consultant, but I didn't have a business degree. I had a communications degree. I'd been flying helicopters and doing leadership and starting a nonprofit. Now I'm in boardrooms telling people how to do their change programs as a high paid, executive consultant, talk about feeling inadequate, like you don't know what you're doing. And like, here I am to be the expert telling you. And I just read about this last night. And similarly, even with all that leadership training and really kind of just talking about being a human, there was one time we did an interview in Fox News for our in their studio in NYC in 2016, and then I had to go and talk to the head of the NYU School of Medicine, who's a neurosurgeon, about traumatic brain injury, because that's the platform that we were on. I was freaking out, Stacy. Like, how am I going to go and talk to this neuroscientist, the head of the NY School of Medicine? Who am I to be, talking about this? So all these things like resonate with me so much. But I guess my question for you, kind of trying to refocus it, Chase, is, a lot of our listeners have been leaders, or they're in leadership roles in some of these larger organizations. Maybe they work in HR, maybe they are entrepreneurial in their own business. And maybe, it's hard to think that these would be completely new concepts, but maybe they're just been so heads down and focused that they're hearing about some of this stuff for the first time. So when you talk with these, leaders at different levels, all the way up to the C-suite, can you share a bit about what they should be thinking about, or what are some of the kind of conversation starters you have with them to better address the well-being of their employees within the organization, and what that partnering process might be like with you or Wellbeing ThinkTank?
Sure. So I think the most important thing organizations can do is provide training to their management and employees. We have such a huge skills gap. Oftentimes, when you're really good at your job, you get promoted into leadership roles, and managing people and managing a program, a process, something else in work is an entirely different skill set. And it's even unusual where I'm at now. I always like to say I failed up. So I fail all the time, but I always try to fail up. So I learn from my failures. And I will tell you, there are people who probably worked with me as their manager earlier in my career who will tell you I was the worst manager they've ever had, because I failed and I just didn't know what I was doing yet. And then there's other people who tell you I was the best manager they ever had. The one thing I've always tried to carry with me is that I do genuinely care about people. And I think that's why when I was in the military, I had such loyal soldiers that I worked with, because I knew all their wives, I knew their kids' names, I really knew who they were. And I try to do that in the corporate environment, but I will be the first to admit that I have definitely failed and messed up and not managed people correctly in my past. But I try, and I still mess up now. I still make mistakes. But I think that's a huge skills gap of like emotional intelligence, empathy. And a story I like to tell is I was working with an engineering firm at one point, and I had a senior director who was an engineer. And he told me, he was like, I don't know if I have emotional intelligence. Like, I don't know if I have the capacity for it. And he was sharing with me that he was a little neurodiverse. And he's like, I don't know if my brain can even do this. Like, this is very foreign to me. But I recommended some books and some things for him. And I was like, you might not ever genuinely feel this way. That might not be an emotion that really ticks because of the way your brain is built, but you can still learn how to behave in this way. And 6 months later, when I was back at the company, he was like, oh, I read these, I did this. Like, I'm able to, like, I don't feel it, but I can act in the correct way. He was basically showing empathy. He was telling me he didn't really still feel it, but he was able to behave in a way that was more taking care of his people.
Mimicking, right?
Yeah, mimicking.
Yeah.
So at least, and hey, that was the best he could do. And that was still really impactful. With workplaces, usually I always start with surveys, which are based on employee listening. So really, when I'm talking to organizations and leaders, I ask them, what does well-being mean to you? What does that mean? What does success look like? Sometimes they're thinking about it in the health context. So they're thinking about, well, we literally want people to be healthier because the problem they're trying to solve is the problem of healthcare costs. And sometimes I always try to redirect them to attrition or turnover, because you're probably spending more money on that than anything. So what does attrition look like in your organization? And let's try to solve for that. But I really try to do this balancing act of, what does leadership want? What does the organization want? And then it's a lot of employee listening. So using a lot of evidence-based indexes to figure out, how do people feel? What does team performance look like? What does employee engagement look like? How are people flourishing, or are they suffering? And really looking at human needs. Like, you can't talk about wellness without talking about wages. Like, if you're not paying someone a living wage and now they have to work multiple jobs, well, of course, they're going to be more stressed and they're not going to be as present at work because of all of these things. And they're not in a good financial, it's just a whirlwind. It's workplace well-being. I call it a yes and game, because you have to do everything. Like, you have to have positive leadership. You need to have really good corporate communications. You need to have excellent learning and development programs. You have to pay people well. You have to have access to good benefits. You have to have a safe, healthy workspace that's not going to injure someone. You have to think about being inclusive in the workplace, and how do we really embrace and recognize diversity in the workplace and the unique talent everyone brings. But I think investing in training and education and carving out the time for it, it will pay off. I see it a lot more in smaller organizations, and I tend to work with more smaller organizations that don't have as much bureaucracy and red tape, and they can actually change. Where big, large organizations like Accenture tends to work with big global firms, like global, that's really hard to make change. But a small 200 to 1,000 person company, that CEO can make decisions. Those senior directors can make decisions. They can really change. And I've seen, through measured year-over-year measurements, I've seen the cultures at organizations shift, and I've seen people be so grateful and thankful. And when you take care of someone, they will do good work for you. They will be loyal. Humans don't hate work, and it's not that no one wants to work anymore or anything like that, but we want to be valued. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be appreciated. And when we leave work each day, we want to get that feeling of accomplishment. And if we're able to craft and cultivate an environment where people feel that when they leave work each day, they're going to want to come back. They're not going to have the Sunday scaries. They're going to be friends with their coworkers. And being friends does not mean you're friends outside of the office. It can be a workplace relationship, and that is completely appropriate. They are your work friends. They might not be your personal friends, but you should enjoy the people you work with. If you go in every day and you hate everything, it's going to impact your physical health and your mental health.
You just mentioned, you were talking about diversity in the workplace. You just brought up friends, and that actually segues exactly into what was something that was really in my mind when you were talking, which is, one thing that I've always tried to do is have a diverse range of friends from different backgrounds, religions, cultures, even Air Force. So, and it makes you aware of other people's needs and struggles in a way that you may not have ever known. And it's hard sometimes when you get an opportunity to be friends like that, to just shut up and don't help until you really know what's needed. And so, for me, I had my eyes open in the very best ways working with vision impaired coworkers and graduates at the Guide Dog Foundation for the Blind and America's Vet Dogs. So I've always found the number one thing that keeps me at a job that I'm dissatisfied with is those relationships and friends with, like I mentioned in my first question. But it does also make you aware of each other's needs and struggles. So I always work to be easy to approach, to apologize to, and easy to correct. But like Stacy, sometimes that means I end up carrying more than my share. And unfortunately, it makes you realize more than ever how important it is to be there for people. And I say unfortunate because I always feel like I could be doing more. So sometimes I'll get on a phone call at the end of the day. It's like 4:30 and I'm making these little 10-minute calls or less. And I just get full on trauma dumped for an hour. And it's right before dinner with my family. So I have to hear about this guy's like admittedly like awful situation that's way worse on him than it is for me to have to hear it. But then I have to go upstairs and eat dinner with my family. So these people obviously need that. And I really can carry that burden, but I also need to be able to shut that off when I need to. So my question to you is, after all that rambling, how do we make time for our own well-being without feeling guilty? Because I feel like I do an okay job at it, but I feel like I'm getting worse in some ways. Maybe I'm taking on more than I used to. Maybe my endurance isn't what it used to be.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a few things. I'm thinking back to something Stacy said earlier too, which it's almost like, how can you self-disclose almost, which is kind of what I was hearing Stacy about, like, how can you feel like safe enough as an individual? So I think what you're doing, Joe, is you've obviously been able to role model vulnerability, and that's something leaders need to do, is role model vulnerability and talk about like, hey, everyone, I didn't sleep well last night. Like I might be a little off my game today. Like it's not you, like I'm just tired, or, hey, I've got some stuff going on at home. Just so you know, I'm kind of grumpy this week. Like it's not you. And that's really, I think if a leader can kind of lean into that and say, hey, just like this. But then there is a boundary line. So someone like trauma dumping on you, like that's not your place. I don't think I think sometimes managers or leaders, they feel like they have to take it all on, and you're not a licensed mental health therapist, I'm assuming. Like that's not your role to play. So your role as a supervisor, and this is something from IO, we have like supervisor support. So supervisor support is being able to listen and ask someone like, how are you? Like, no, how are you really? And kind of get to know a little bit of information. Then it's to provide instrumental support. And instrumental support might be doing something like adjusting their scheduling. Maybe if they're going through a divorce or something, or maybe their spouse has cancer and they're really stressed out, you say, hey, let me adjust your workload. And that's providing instrumental support. But your job is not to be their therapist and have to take on all of that heaviness, but it's to guide them towards the resources that the organization provides. So does the organization have an employee assistance program? What are the mental health benefits available? So to be able to say, hey, like, wow, thank you so much for trusting me enough for sharing this. How can I help you as your manager? How can I help you, over these next several weeks or months?
Yeah.
While you're dealing with this. And, I really want you to know about this. Here are some resources that the organization provides. Let me know if you need help navigating. Like, I think it'd be really helpful for you to talk to someone, but you don't have to be the martyr and take all that on. I think when we genuinely, and especially veterans, we genuinely care about other people, we can sometimes be saviors a little bit too much. We're constantly trying to save everyone else. Like we're the first to run into a situation. But we can't keep doing that because, yeah, you have to take care of yourself and your family. So I think there's a way you can be open and vulnerable and check in with people. And sometimes maybe setting the boundary at the beginning of like, hey, I noticed, you seemed a little off today. I only have 10 minutes, but I just really wanted to check in with you and see, is there anything I could do? And then from individuals, when the supervisor creates that vulnerable and safe space, you can be a little bit more, oh, just so you know, I really struggle with chronic pain and I need this, or I have pretty bad ADHD and this is kind of how I work with things. And, here's kind of how I am. But then it's like, yeah, it's hard to make space for other people, but then still prioritize yourself. I think literally carving out time on your calendar, like blocking time for you to have like to eat, to actually take that lunch break, to take a walk, to stretch, whatever feels good to you, to have a mindful moment. And then create those boundaries with workers. Like, we want to be friendly and we want to have respect and care about each other, but it doesn't need to be to the level of our personal relationships. And I think that type of boundary is okay. With supervisors, it's very hard as leaders because you can't really be friends with your subordinates. You know, you're friendly towards them, but it's more of a respect relationship.
Yeah.
But that's when hopefully you find a leader at another organization or someone else that you can talk to. Because you still need a safe space as well. Like, everyone needs that space to be
Yeah.
heard and validated. And when you're in higher leadership, it's harder to find those spaces. So sometimes you might connect with leaders. So joining community groups, you know, of other professionals. And, you know, if you have a veterans ERG in the workplace, obviously that's a great employee resource group of
Yeah.
veterans, great to find. But you can find people in other places too. Even, I will tell you, even like LinkedIn, that is kind of what LinkedIn's for. It's kind of lost
Yeah.
its way because people are so starved for connection and we're in a loneliness epidemic. So, you know, LinkedIn has been turning, but I have strangers reach out to me all the time who are like, hey, I'm really interested in your career path. Would you be interested in doing this? But if you like, Adam, if you were looking for someone, you could probably go in and look at veteran. You could probably even type in like Apache helicopter or something and try to find maybe another veteran who is maybe
You
in
think he hasn't done that already?
yeah, and you could just pull.
I type in
He's done it
Apache
twice since
into
we've been
every
on this
search
podcast.
engine.
He
Most people
Googles
are
himself.
most people are genuinely nice, and you know, like, you might not get a response, but some people will be like, oh yeah, you know, because you're kind of stroking their ego of like, oh, I'd like to connect with you,
Yeah.
you know, and meet you and learn more about what you do. And you know, I have all mentorship relationships are co-mentoring. You know, you're mentoring each other. And I have some wonderful colleagues in my industry who, you know, I talk to and share stuff and they share stuff and we talk about our work and we just learn from each other. And it's really symbiotic and lovely.
Thank you
That's
so
amazing.
much.
Chase, this has been a tremendous chat, and I've learned a lot of things to take away. And I'm sure the alphas have been had their minds blown just as much as we have. So it's been a lot of really wonderful nuggets. Really appreciate your time. And before we sign off, was there anything that we may not have covered that you think the alphas should know about?
I don't know. One of the things I shared before the podcast is I've had the opportunity to work with companies and talk to veterans, like employee resource groups, and I talk about like finding this path to wellness as a civilian. And I think veterans, we really have to learn how to give ourselves grace. And especially in that time of transition, you're coming from this very regimented, controlled environment into corporate America, which, Adam, it sounds like you were tossed into it, is an entirely different world. And then every company is unique. It's really hard. You have to learn a whole new way of working, a whole new way of communicating, a whole new everything. And so to give yourselves grace if you're trying to figure out how the heck do I get into this corporate environment and play this game, because it's kind of a game. It is. And learn all this new jargon and how I'm supposed to act and all this stuff. So I just hope veterans can give themselves grace because you're already carrying a lot, but you have so much to offer the corporate sector. I think veterans, you know, we're very strong-willed. It takes a lot to rattle us. If no one's going to die or get fired, it can wait till tomorrow. Why are you all
Yeah.
stressed out over an email? You know, it's like no one's dying here. If you're in healthcare,
It barely caught on fire. Can you guys
Yeah.
chill?
I'm just like, oh my gosh, like when I was at an insurance company, everyone would freak out about paper, like being late. And I'm just like, oh my God, we got to get this mailed out. And I'm just like, y'all are stressing me out because you're all freaking out. I'm like, it's fine. It's paper. Like it's not going to
Yeah.
impact anything. So, so I think we have so much to bring the corporate sector, but finding that strength in yourself and just like acknowledging, okay, these are the things I'm going to bring. Yeah. We talked about so many random, like different things. I hope, yeah, whenever I talk to people, I hope they get a nugget. So I hope throughout this conversation, whoever listens to this episode, you get a nugget. A lot of things might not resonate, but if you get one thing that does, then hopefully it was worth your time. And that's something you can put into place.
I would say we at least got a 20-piece nugget out
Yes,
of
20-piece nuggets with
Oh,
some
I
extra
love
dipping
that.
sauce.
Yeah.
Sriracha.
We're gonna have Chase's website and social media in the show notes, you guys. But Chase, for the alphas who are listening, can you give us your website, please?
Yeah, so wellbeingthinktank.org is my free education organization. I have sponsors that help support it. So we put on free virtual events. So they're accessible, it's free. Who doesn't love that? And you can just come and learn about different topics every month. We get into so many different aspects that impact us in the workplace. So it's really fascinating stuff. And then my business is HHP Cultures. And yeah, I know my email, my LinkedIn, like I'm always happy to connect and chat with anyone. I love chatting about workplace well-being, as you probably noticed, or so many different things. I have a lot of different passions and I'm totally a talker. I live alone with a cat. So I'm like, oh, humans. I'm like,
Wonderful.
so yeah, but thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate all of you. Thank you all for your service and that you're continuing to serve the veteran community and help them. And, that's something I'm passionate about doing as well. As someone who's been able to transition from military life and have a successful civilian career, like I'm very passionate about letting other veterans know, like, you can do this, like you can make, like, it's a weird transition, but like you can transition, like it's a little weird at first, but you can be super successful. And you have a lot to bring to the table. So I don't want people to ever feel othered or different or less than, just because they're carrying everything that happened during their military experience.
Awesome. All right, my fellow red badge holders, stick around. After the break, we'll have some scuttlebutt coming at you.
The American Legion is raising awareness about PTSD and veteran suicide by offering hope, camaraderie, and support.
Be the one to help end veteran suicide.
Be the one to save one veteran.
Be the one to ask a veteran in your life how they're doing.
Be the one to reach out when a veteran is struggling.
Go to betheone.org and help the American Legion end veteran suicide.
Will you be the one?
Okay, Alphas, we hope you had a great break. Now it's time for some scuttlebutt.
Retired Army General Mark Milley, aka the 20th chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, stated at an Axios event that 10 to 15 years from now, my guess is a third, maybe 25% to a third of the U.S. military will be robotic.
Can you say that with a robotic voice, though?
Robotic. Oh, you got to do the arm movement.
You gotta do the scissor hands.
The army will be robotic. It's easy to wonder what such a military would look like in the future. It's only natural, one would think, of super soldiers like that of Captain America, or maybe we're closer to recreating Halo than we thought. We already have a Cortana. Now all we need is a Master Chief. But in all seriousness, it'd be an oversight to not mention how they've already automated bomb-sniffing dogs when they traded bomb-sniffing canines for bomb-sniffing robots at the Indy 500 this past May. Is that true? They had bomb-sniffing robots?
I don't watch the Indy 500, so I kind of missed that.
I like the idea of having robots in war fighting other robots. I think at a certain point we can just shake hands with like whoever we're at war with and be like, let's not make the robots, let's do it all digitally and just play games against each other. And that's how we'll settle wars. And then I'm pretty sure that 12-year-olds would end up ruling the entire planet.
I think this lends in a sort of philosophical, maybe existential question, though. So if we have robots fighting the wars, there is still going to be collateral damage, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Which was, the whole drone thing,
Yeah. Which means, our countries, whether it's us or other countries, they send their drone or their robots to war, but yet innocent bystanders still get killed in the process. There are no winners in war. There will be no casualties because there'll be robots, but there will still be casualties outside. Anyway, where am I getting with this? Yeah, great. Well, yeah, great. We'll save our military, but innocents will die. Oh, wonderful. Great.
Yeah, I mean, these questions have been, coming, and it's obviously, been all in the movies for the last, 30 years and beyond. like, have you seen those Boston Dynamic robots, the like the humanoid looking one,
Yeah.
and what all, like, and then there's like the dog looking one, and those things, like, at first they were so clumsy, and there's even videos that show like the evolution of what they can do. So and then it gets into the, like you're saying, Stacy, like, okay, once you have a thing with that capability, what are the impacts of that on humanity and society is like part of warfare. And then like the comical side to what you're saying, Joe, is like watching my son play Fortnite, and then he'll get that little robot that follows him around, and he
Yeah.
is like his defense and his security. So it's like, you just have one soldier connected with, I don't know, one multiple robots, and then all of a sudden, one becomes a squad. Or drone warfare, like, do you even need to be there to control them? Or what if these robots have artificial intelligence, and then we're just fighting Skynet?
I've got a
Well, I
homework
was just
for you.
get out of my brain hole, Adam, because I was just thinking, so is Reese going to come back in time and be like, you're the future bearer of the savior for tomorrow. We're going to need you to stop Skynet, stop AI. Like, they were like, you mentioned it on the podcast, on the Tango Alpha Lima podcast, the collateral that this was going to cause. You said it. You predicted the future. You're going to stop it now. You said it.
Yeah, we're actually in the movie right now. Okay, well, actually, everything the government says is propaganda, and everything they tell you in between the lines of sci-fi movies is the real truth.
All right, now we're in Spaceballs. We need to go over to we need to go over to the coffee making machine, because I like to have my coffee while I'm watching Radar. Anyway, yeah.
So I mean, I guess
there's a big question about the morals surrounding war. Obviously, human error happens, but
Yeah.
the humanity behind war also limits the casualties of war as well. And so I think
there's a book that touches on that is a classic you may have read or seen the movie, which does a fairly decent job, is Ender's Game. It really touches on that. Oh my gosh, it's really, really, if you don't have time for the book, it's a moral book, and it doesn't feel that way, but you absolutely should read it, because it touches upon this in a way that I don't want to ruin for anyone who hasn't read the book. So
what I just think real clearly, like, you can't talk about robots at this day and age without AI. And right now there are rules about humans running the robots, but at what point does AI take over and let the robots taking over their own decision making? And this is a real conversation that's going on with people like Elon Musk and OpenAI and Google's AI. Now everybody's developing an AI, and like, what is informing like the programming, and what conditions are being put in there, and what does truth actually look like? And so these are real considerations that have to happen. But the way government normally works is something happens, and the technology and the events get ahead, and then laws and policies and resolutions come after the fact, not necessarily before. So this is something that we all need to be talking about. So I think for the listeners, I'd like to know, like, how do you feel about going robotic, and what and where does AI tie into it? Be interested to hear from
I will say, if we're going to do it anywhere, bomb sniffing dogs is a good place to start. I think that's something that they're not taking anybody's job, that somebody's like, oh shucks, I was about to go check that bag out.
Well, yeah.
A4B7's over there now.
One big plug here. You know how Navy SEALs love to get out and write books. Well, if I'm going to plug a Navy SEAL writing books, there's a guy by the name of Jack Carr. And if you're not familiar with his series, his most recent in his series just came out. It's called Red Sky Morning, and it actually touches on this very subject about AI in combat. So check out Red Sky Morning by Jack Carr if you want a really good thriller. Go back and listen to the previous 6 in the series, or read the previous 6 books in his series, and then read Red Sky Morning by Jack Carr.
Thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah.
So we'll, of course, have links for that in the show notes. So bomb sniffing dogs may be able to replace canines in some instances, but there are some things only a furry companion can provide. A CBS News report shared the story of Marine Dalton Stone and Isaac Wysand, who met while serving their canine unit in Japan. So when the pair returned stateside, they had to leave their dogs behind to continue working in Japan. And for 2 years, Dalton worked with drug-sniffing canine Ada, and Wysand was paired with bite and bomb-sniffing canine Poker, which is a good name for a bitey dog, Poker. Sorry, just
Poker in the rear.
Well,
that would be more like Nipper.
Poker.
I think
barely
Nipper
know
might be
her.
a better biting dog name, but you know.
Which what? Bitey, McBiteface?
Biter.
Poker is a different kind of visual for me, but you know.
What? So what is that?
I'm not even gonna go there.
like you know, with the poking iron from the fire.
I get it. Yeah,
somebody.
stoking her fire. I gotcha. All right.
Poke her.
We can fix it in post. So for 2 years, Dalton worked with these two dogs. But last month, thanks to the help of American Humane, a nonprofit animal group, the Marines were able to navigate the process to have the dogs brought back to the U.S., flying from Okinawa to Tyler, Texas. Has anyone ever met Tyler, by the way? Side note.
I have.
You have?
He's a great
Seems
guy.
like a good guy.
Yep.
So American Humane is also covering Ada and Poker's vet bills for life. The organization has helped reunite 60 dogs with the military handlers since 2014. That's huge, because that's a sob story, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean, that's a story that I've heard more than once that just makes no sense to me on paper, how you can work with these people. And then I say people, these dogs, and I'm not like I love dogs. I've been working with America's Vet Dogs since 2008. I've had 2 service dogs through them. I grew up with Basset Hounds. I love dogs as much as a sane person can before you get into like licking their mouths. I don't do that.
I have so many questions, Joe. What?
What? Some people are like, "Oh, my dog," and they are like letting them lick their face and stuff. I'm just not that guy.
Oh, I'm that guy, but
there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just not that. I say that because as somebody who is not that guy, these stories crush my heart. To know that these people work with these dogs for this long and go through so much, and then they leave. Like, imagine leaving and leaving a member of your unit back there. Even if they're going with another unit, it just doesn't feel right. And knowing that, that they've done everything that you've done, they've dealt with the stress, it's just, I don't know, it's hard.
I wonder the emotional toll the dog goes through.
Yeah.
I love a good dog reunion story. My 13-year-old will not watch dog movies because she says that the dog always dies. And
I think that's
probably fair.
Yeah.
Except for the on Neverending Story, the luck dragon that looks like a dog. I think he lives.
There was one with Mark Wahlberg recently, and they're doing some kind of ultra race, and they find this dog, and it ends up running through the forest an incredible amount of miles, and links up with them, and they end up going across the finish line with the dog.
Spoiler alert. I was gonna watch
just
that,
so you know, if you have somebody in your family that doesn't like to watch these things because the dog dies, well, I'm just telling you, the dog lives, and it's great, and it's rewarding, and you should watch it.
I'm reading a really heartfelt, beautiful story about a dog named Cujo. I've just started, but it's looking very promising.
I
sounds like a sweet. Sounds
like
a sweet
same
pup.
story Adam was just talking about.
Sweet pup.
It was an ultra marathon. The guy was running with a dog named Cujo. It ends well.
I think I'm gonna go get a tattoo. I'm really excited about this book.
Something about a junkyard. I don't know. What could go wrong?
Oh man.
So watching the video of the reunion of these dogs and their handlers is super emotional, as you can imagine. We'll have the link to that story so you alphas can also check it out and try to stay. It's the dry eye challenge.
Joe, you and I both know that you can't stay away from anything without crying.
So what do you mean by that?
No judgment.
How did you know that you don't like the dogs licking you in the mouth, Joe?
Well, like anything, same way I know I'm straight.
Okay. Well,
Try
moving on.
anything twice.
I have never met Tyler, but I do know of Taylor, Texas, and we're gonna go to that next for Bravo Zulu. The heat is on in Taylor, Texas, but the Graham D. Luhn American Legion Post 39 has a massive mission to help people stay cool this summer. The American Legion took over the summer fan program previously operated by the Salvation Army. Helping our neighbors with fans is critical because the summer heat can pose dangerous health consequences for the elderly, ill, or disabled, said a press release from the American Legion. Fans are free of charge, and to qualified individuals, the application requirements are a photo identification, name, age, and or disability, home address, number in household, and have you previously received a fan. Residents who are 50 years or older and those with medical disabilities are considered a priority for the program. For more information, you can contact Ernest Areola, Post 39 Chaplain, and the number is 540-903-5674. Again, that's Post Chaplain or Post 39 Chaplain 5045. Hey, I'm going to get this right one more time. Post 39 Chaplain 5403. Oh, maybe not. Third time's a charm. Chaplain can be reached at 540-903-5674.
There you go. Woo!
Hey, if
You know
got
what? I was just going to say, I'm a really big fan of programs like this.
me too. I'm a fan of fans.
I think that Justin Bieber should donate some of his fans.
Or
Whoa.
Taylor Swift.
Swifties.
Swifties.
T
Some
Swizzle
fans.
could come in here.
T
If
Swizzle's
she
got-
just donated 1% of her fans.
We were
Hey,
talking about her
Swifties.
fans earlier.
Swifties, if you got some fans, if the Swiftie fans have fans they want to donate, those fans can be donated.
I don't know. I've got one of those big Dyson fans, and I just bought one that for a smaller one. It's like a Dreo, I think it is, and I've only had it for a little while. And no, they're not paying me, but I am super impressed by that little
Dreo?
desk fan.
Never
Yeah,
heard of it.
that's all.
What
It
about
was
the
a little
Dyson?
cheap fan.
Are
The
the
Dyson's
Dyson fans worth
fantastic.
it? They look cool.
They're fantastic. They're really good and they're quiet. I looked up quiet fans because I wanted to put it in my recording room. Obviously, I know I can't record and use this, at the fan at the same time, but I still wanted a quieter fan. I don't like a lot of sound in there. That fan
I like
is
a good box fan.
nice.
I like a good box fan that's noisy
Yeah.
to
to sleep.
with.
To sleep,
Yeah, to
absolutely.
sleep.
Yeah.
Something about the aviator tinnitus helps with.
I like the noisier the fan, the better. Like if I could pick one from the 1930s that was metal on metal,
Oh yeah.
like bring it
Gotta
up.
be careful though, because you will lose a finger if you don't adjust that the right way.
I
You
think-
guys aren't
way
from
those
the
old ones.
South, really. Have you guys ever had attic fans?
No.
Okay. There was, how like in your ceiling you have like the pull down where you can go up into the attic or whatever. Well, near that there is this big like 5 foot by 5 foot fan in the hallway that will shut every door in your house when you turn it on. And those things would like pull all the hot air in your whole house up into the attic.
You've been sucked into one of those before, Joe?
Yeah, that's what happened to my leg. I didn't actually go to war.
You're full of hot air. I just knew that had happened.
I'm not full of something.
You're
But
pulling
those,
our leg.
I'm those attic fans. Don't pull mine; it'll come off. But seriously, those attic fans. I'm sure there's a reason why they don't do it anymore. Probably because, somebody did get sucked into it. They're really powerful. Like, no joke. You can't have a door open. Like, somebody knocks on your door and you open the door, and the Jehovah's Witness just falls right in.
Oh Lord. Good job, Post 39 and Taylor, Texas. Taylor Swift fans brings us all back full circle. So hey, if you think about it, donate some fans, everybody. They need them for the heat in Taylor, Texas.
Because it blows there now.
Do-do-do.
Hey, Alphas, don't forget that we're heading to the National Convention in New Orleans later this week. Make sure you follow the American Legion on your favorite social media channels, such as YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, and even LinkedIn, to keep up with everything happening. If you'll be in the Big Easy along with us, please stop by to visit us in the exhibit hall.
I need.
Do we not
some
have
tea.
a MySpace anymore?
What?
MySpace, no,
Snapchat?
they had to keep writing the code to update it, so it's just too much for the content team.
I'm still on.
I
I'm still on Etch a Sketch.
I actually have fun with it. Just sketches.
It doesn't
But-
surprise me, Joe.
You guys are haters today.
Shake it off. Shake it
Are you
off.
guys are you guys excited about the convention?
Yeah.
I am, yeah.
I need a beignet like nobody's business.
Whoa, yes. You know, that's
I
gonna
didn't
be the
even think
first
about
time
that.
we all meet in person. Are you guys having
We're gonna
second
have a
thoughts?
beignet party.
Yes, let's do that. Let's get to New Orleans. We're gonna get a beignet, and then we're gonna meet up with some of these alphas we've been talking to one-sidedly. Make it a two-sided
it.
conversation. So we'll see you guys in New Orleans.
Whoop, whoop.
All right, alphas, thanks for listening. You can subscribe to our podcast, our newsletter, or send us mail and guest recommendations at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. We'll see you next week in New Orleans.